Visual Arts Podcast and Web Show. I'm Joe Rochert, illustrator, animator, and adjunct professor.
And I'm Louis Rosignol. And today we are going to be talking about something that I think every artist goes through this process of finding, which is your art style or an artistic voice. And I actually have done a video about this before years ago. I didn't remember doing it, but Joe and I haven't talked to about it together. And I think it's a really important topic because um, when I think about like an artistic style, um, it's like people if you're just doing art for the fun of it, maybe it's not so important to have an artistic style. But if you want to become like a professional artist, you have to have a voice. You have to have something that people can recognize, right? And so like when they see your work, they know that it's your work. You'd agree with that, right, Joe?
I do agree. Yeah.
And so and it's not something that um it's so this is an interesting topic to talk about because it is not something that Joe and I can just be like, all right, step one, you do this, step two, you do this, and after these 5 steps, you'll have an art style. It's it's really like I think what we're going to do is we're going to talk about how we developed our art styles and how hopefully you can use these things to do that yourself. Um, because I think if you learn how Joe and I developed our styles, it'll help you in figuring out like what you can do. But there's no right or wrong answer. I mean, there's no one way to develop an art style. Would you? I mean, but there are things that I think you could do that will help along the way.
Yeah. Yeah, so you could lock yourself in a room and never look at an artist and draw all day, and you might develop a unique art style just because you're only being influenced by yourself. But
Yeah,
that's not that's kind of hard to do. Definitely hard to do these days is to just turn off everything else and run on autopilot. It probably can't happen very easily. And so,
I think. Yeah, I think you're right, and I don't think it's likely that you're going to come up with something that's totally unique in this world where there's just so many artists out there, right?
yeah. So you have to be aware and true to yourself and be able to identify characteristics of your drawings that make you you, that come naturally to you, that you enjoy. Maybe it's ways of drawing that keep popping up in your work over and over again. But you need to be aware. You need to be aware of who you are and what you're doing. So much influence comes from out outside sources, so other artists, other things you surround yourself with, things you watch on TV, things artists, yeah, other artists you follow, um, and it ends up becoming a game of awareness there too, because then you have to identify what do you love about all these different mediums that you're surrounding yourself with. Why do you love them? And trying to pinpoint aesthetics that then you can Frankenstein together with your own twist, and that ends up becoming your style.
That's it. That's actually a really good way to describe it. Is right. Everyone has their own um, influences, right? Artists that you love and things that you're gathering inspiration from, and so you're the only person in the world with those exact influences, right?
Hmm.
There's other people that like some of the same artists as you, but there's probably not another person that has all of the exact same influences you do, and so because of that, you're going to have, if you can combine all of these influences into one thing and then put yourself into it too, you're going to have something that's unique.
Hmm.
It's not going to be perfectly unique. There's nothing out there there's no art. I can't think of an artist out there that's perfectly unique, that's not like anybody else. And so if you're trying to create something like that, I don't think you'll succeed. But and there's nothing wrong with that. But so it's like a balance of all right, I'm not going to be able to come up with something totally unique, but I also don't want to be derivative of another artist. And so it's this fine balance, right?
Yeah.
But I think that the key is having as many influences as you can within your work. The fewer the influences, the more likely you are to become a derivative of the. If you only have one or two influences, you're going to probably end up looking your work will look almost just like theirs, and that's not good. But if you have hundreds of influences, at least, you're more likely to be able to have enough of different things that are going to come into your work that'll make it unique.
Yeah, I agree. So I see this a lot with times get stuck with with one big influence, and one of them tends to be just anime in general.
Yeah.
It's like as
Yep.
cool as cool as anime can be, and as skillful as it can be, it, it you can't deny that it does fall into a genre of look feel, and a lot of it does look similar to each other. And
Right.
if you love that kind of stuff and surround yourself with that stuff, your work starts to look like that stuff, and you're pigeonholing yourself. Now your work looks like millions of other artists. And so sure, there's no problem in using anime as an influence, but don't saturate the market, or you gotta diversify your operation.
Yeah, I would say that that's a good way to put it. And look, when I was in school, it was the same thing. Anime and manga were like such huge influences even then, and so many of the students were. You could tell that that was their one big influence. And you know, they're not developing a unique style by just copying that. So I wanted to talk about experimenting with different mediums. So when you first start really taking art seriously and drawing seriously, um, you're not. It's not like you're going to develop a style immediately. It's going to take time, and the only way to develop a style that really suits you is to experiment with not only styles but to experiment with mediums, because the more you experiment with mediums, the more you're going to see which ones are you're good at, basically, or you're playing to your strengths and your weaknesses. So um, you get to at least give them all a chance, and that's what I found. It was the biggest part of creating my own style is playing with all different mediums, and then figuring out, okay, these ones I'm not good at all. I have to drop these because they're not working for me, and then these ones I'm gonna play up because I'm pretty good with them. But without that experimenting, I would have maybe just stayed on, because I started with like markers and Copic markers and like what do you call those little black liners that everyone uses? Um, I can't remember the name of them, but I was using those two things only, and it was like kind of restrictive. And I'm so glad that during school I was forced to experiment with different mediums, because man, if I hadn't done that, I would be stuck like in a rut with something that I don't even use either of those things anymore. I don't even think I'm that good with them, so I don't know why I was using them.
Yeah,
Do you think
sometimes it's
that
a sometimes it's a comfort
yeah,
thing, right? You get
well,
stuck in
100%.
medium, and yeah, you gotta throw yourself around and try new things. And also, we keep talking about a style as if it's, I don't know, as if it's easy. But when you're first starting out, don't even I wouldn't even worry about it. Uh, when you're first starting, now then when you're first when you're first starting, it's time to really just get your foundations aligned. And so your drawing skills, your ability, your comfort with different mediums, uh, ex- experiment with realism, experiment with drawing from and uh, just learning how to see. Learning how to see is the most important thing, um, and how to translate reality from a three dimension into a two dimension. And so it's super important to get that foundation skills, and then once you have that, you can start to experiment with exaggerating reality once you know how to work within reality.
Right, for sure. Like I think developing a style comes kind of later on in the process. You need to learn the fundamentals first. Um, and so I have a question for you. We talked a little bit about influences and how they're going to impact your style. Did you spend any time? Because I know that I did. Literally trying to like some of the artists that I love. I literally was trying to copy their style just to see if I could figure out how they did certain things. And I think that that was huge and so important to even though the drawings that I was making while I was doing that, they were very unoriginal because I'm copying someone else's work, basically. Um, I learned so much that I ended up using in the style that I work in now. And so, did you spend any time taking like specific individual artists and trying to mimic what they were doing just to see if you could figure out how they worked?
Yeah, not a ton of it directly, but I do study and learn techniques on how to get the same effects. Um, a lot of the artists that I admire and I pull influence from uh, are very fast illustrators, and so they're either fast because they have to be because it's an animation, or um, they've chosen they've chosen a style to pursue that, yeah, just doesn't take a ton of time. And I was always attracted to that because of the innocence of line quality and coloring, and um, it, uh, it seems a lot more natural and attainable and realistic for career goals. You know, so if you can get an image done in a very short amount of time and get paid the same amount, might as well start to go in that direction. And so it was more so um, studying their technique, but I never did I didn't do too many master studies of pieces to try to copy.
And I don't even mean that I was doing that. Excuse me. I wasn't doing like master studies and copying their pieces, but I would try like if I wanted to draw something, I'd be like, I want to try to draw this as if I am this person in their style. So I'm
Mm,
not copying a piece of their work. I'm trying to like look at their work and then look at a reference photo and say, all right, can I take this reference photo and make a drawing using it, but also by taking all of their style out and doing it. And I learned so much doing that. I did it with multiple different artists, and just seeing if I could create something that was exactly in their style, so that um, almost somebody couldn't tell that it wasn't them. And that's hard to do, like for because everyone's style is their unique way of drawing is. Um, it's hard to mimic a lot of that, but I tried and I learned a lot. Of course, like if you're talking about like a digital art, that's easier to mimic someone's style and do it in a way that you could probably nail it because a lot of times they're using like very straight lines or shapes that you can easily mimic on Procreate or whatever. But if I'm talking about like traditional mediums, it's a lot harder to try to mimic somebody, but you can learn so much doing it.
mm, it's a good exercise. I feel like it
Yeah.
would be fun. I think it would even be fun too. Let's say you were an anime nut, but then you're like, okay, how do I make this scene look like Simpsons? and completely change the world? Can you figure out the rules of the world and stay within that? So it's I think that's a good exercise.
That's kind of what I'm saying. Now what do you think about being constrained? Because obviously if you're an artist that has a distinct style, it can feel constraining in a way, and because you're stuck working within the boundaries of that style. Although I feel like if you're always experimenting and pushing yourself, you can do things that expand your style, but still stay within and enough of it. Um, but it's even though it is confining, I feel like it's so important because um, if you just like, for instance, how many artists do you know that are great at doing like 10 different styles? None. Like, if the people that I know that do a lot of styles, they're adequate at the styles they do.
Hmm.
And if you want to get art as, or work as an artist or work as an illustrator, you have to be at least good, if not great, at what you do. And that's why it's worth constraining yourself to the one or maybe two styles that you want to work within, because then that's when you can really become great, because you're spending all of your artistic time working at that style, at that way of drawing.
You have to remember that your style is constantly evolving,
Yeah.
and it's always changing. Even if you can't totally notice it from piece to piece, it is constantly changing slowly. And what's rising to the top is you, right? Your
Yeah.
your your true essence, your true style is gonna keep prevailing over and over and over again, no matter what the medium. It'll shine through somehow. Like if I pick up a block of clay and start making a character, it'll start to look like how I would draw it,
Yeah.
you know. But it's just another medium, and so am I consciously doing that? I don't know if I'm consciously doing that anymore. I'm not consciously trying to fit in a style. It's more I'm consciously trying to think, does this do I like it? Two, does it feel like me? Does this feel good? Um, so it, it's always a hard thing to identify. Sometimes it's just trusting yourself too. And
Yeah.
so the style could be solely based around how much trust you have with yourself and
That's a good way to
and,
put it.
and how are you going to show that?
How are you gonna show that trust? I'd like to do an Instagram post where I take, like, work from maybe 10 years ago, and then maybe, like, line up 10 pieces, one from 10 years ago, one from 9 years ago, and just see the development of the style. And I really
Hmm.
would actually, I think I will do that and, post it as, like, a because you'll see from 1 to 10, they kind of fit together, but they'll probably be pretty different. But if you see the in between pieces, it makes sense. Um, and so I think that that's a really good thing to do. But the point of what I'm trying to get at is like, if you see a artist that's like killing it and they have a very distinct style, I used to think, oh, that just must be how they always have drawn, because it's so distinct. But the chances of that are pretty slim. The fact is, they've developed that style by taking their influences in and studying. If they're talented and if they're skilled, it's because they put a lot of time in and they have a lot of influences. But having said that, I do want to talk about something that I think is actually pretty important. And I think that because you know how we said you take your influences and then you also put yourself in, that kind of becomes your style, and
Hmm.
because you're the only one with those influences, it's unique. I think that the part that, because some people might be thinking, like, when you say put myself into it, like, what do you mean? And what I mean when I say that, maybe you have something different. Like, you know how you draw when You have no pressure on you whatsoever. Maybe like you're on the telephone and you're doodling. That's you, basically. That's you without thinking about it. When you're not thinking and you were just to draw, that's truly who you are. So I think you need to maybe to do some exercises where you just get on the phone with somebody and talk and just kind of draw without trying to think about it. And then seeing what it comes out like and how can I bring this part of me into my work because this is like really who I am
Yeah.
without thinking.
Yeah. Sometimes it's drawing without reference,
Yeah.
you know, and so maybe you study what a lizard looks like, right? But then the following week, you try to draw a simplified version of it, or you try to, I don't know, you just try to draw something out off of the top of your head, or so it kind of goes from, for me it was, I thought art was just realism, and I thought it was just how well can you make something look like it is,
Right, right.
and that's what defined your talent. But then I quickly, I think I realized this more when I went to art school, that that's not the case, totally. And so um, I started to draw more from my head. So like I study what realistic stuff would look like, how to do it. Now I'm trying to draw it from my head, and now from there, exaggerating what I remember and exaggerating uh, form. So like learning how to break down a figure, break down an animal as far as shapes go, and then, well, what if I make the head really big, the body really small, and the feet really big? Can you still tell what this thing is? Can you still tell that this lizard is a lizard based off of all these exaggerated proportions? And so
And
it's
generally it's you can.
right, because now you're learning and observing what makes something identify as something, right? So what makes a moose a moose? You know, the is it the antlers? Yeah, that's the biggest part. But
Yeah. Yeah.
but do the antlers even have to look like the antlers in real life? No. You could simplify them down so far, and even a child would be able to identify that it's a moose, you know? And so it's a it's a great experiment to how to exaggerate things as far as you can over and over again, and then see if people can even understand what it is. See if
Exaggerate. Yeah.
if children can even identify what it is. And then, like that's where you start to play with how you exaggerate things is partly who you are, right? That's finding you.
Also, like, not just exaggerating, but simplifying, like you were talking about, like
Right.
the antlers. How far can you simplify them and they still be recognizable as antlers? But I think you kind of hit on something when you first started talking about drawing it without reference, right? Because that like, if you told me to draw um, a lizard, I guess like you just or an alligator right now, that it's tempting to go want to look up a picture and then draw it from there. But I know I'm very confident that I could draw something and show it to you, and you would know that it's an alligator because I know that they're very short legs. They've got a long tail. They've got like bumps. I know where the eyes kind of go, and so when you're drawing like that without reference, you really are drawing from who you are. Like, what do I remember about this? This is you're putting yourself on that paper. Once you get a piece of reference and you start copying, it becomes less of who you are and then what the photograph you're using. And so I think that actually is pretty important. So,
And
um,
put a time limit on it, you know?
yeah,
How would you draw an alligator in if you had only a minute, you
then you
know?
really have to simplify it. But I still think I could do that. I think I could do 10
Oh, totally.
seconds and make it an alligator.
totally. But then you're starting to. It'll be easier to realize what you are exaggerating or what you're focusing in on and what makes
Yep.
your drawing different. Do this experiment with other people. Like you'll see some things float to the top at certain lengths of time. Like if everyone
Yep.
had 1 second to draw an alligator, what are you focusing on? And a lot of times people will focus on the same surface quality of whatever. But every increment that goes up, like 10 seconds, maybe even up to like a minute, a couple minutes, they start to get a lot different. Like how you're positioning it on the page. Are you really trying to push boundaries or not? Um, and then when you have too much time, what do things look like then too? Are you trying to make it too realistic? You
Yeah.
know, yeah.
I feel like developing a style is is almost like this weird thing because well, it is a weird thing. But so on the one hand, we're talking about taking these influences that you have and trying to copy them and learn from that. Um, and and take in what you love about these influences and try to incorporate it into you. So that's a lot of um, that's actually hard work and a lot of learning. And then on the other hand, you what we're talking about here is almost unlearning a bunch of stuff because when you were a child and someone asked you to draw an alligator, you wouldn't look at a picture, you would just draw it. And that's what we're saying is what you should do. So yeah, that way you can unlearn that habit of having to see a picture and having to copy it and having to make it perfect. So
Hmm.
it's like you have to spend some time like studying these influences, sometimes just like l- leaving everything behind and just drawing without reference um and so they seem to be like counterintuitive in a way, but if you do these things, you'll start to develop and you start to see things within yourself and within these influences that you can combine. But man, it's
It's
not it's not like an easy step by step process.
no. It's like learning how to read and write. Like we actually don't have a part of the brain that was originally made to do this, but we can learn how to do this. And I think it's very similar to drawing in a lot of ways where you learn more vocabulary, you learn better sentence structure, you learn how to tell a story better, and you get skill point where giant words and sense to anyone who is at that level, right? But
Right.
who actually understands those words? They now you have to come back down, uh, and find a middle ground of of what's your audience, who are you trying to reach, who are you trying to talk to and speak to, and so you have to
That's
adjust your writing style and
Well, that's actually a really good segue. What's your audience? Because that's what I also wanted to talk about with this is bef- if you're an illustration student or you're someone who wants to get into illustration, when you're developing your style, that's like the first thing that you almost should do is figure out who your audience is. Do you really want to do children's book illustrations? Do you really want to do editorial work? And because there's a big difference. If you look at all the children's books that are coming out right now versus all the magazines that are coming out with editorial illustration, stylistically, they're very different.
mhm,
And so if you grab some current children's books, if let's say children's books is what you decide you would really love to do, if you grab a bunch of new children's books that are just coming out and start studying them and learning what just try to figure out like what is similar about all of these things, um, because you can start to figure out what the art directors in these industries are looking for, and you don't want to be a copy of these people, but you want to figure out what it is that's almost similar about all of them in a way,
mhm,
um, because there is definitely, for instance, like if you look at editorial work right now, it's almost all digital. They're hardly using any traditional mediums anymore, and it's a lot of very simplified. Uh, Almost some of it looks like stock imagery, but I know a lot of it is commissioned. But it's very simplified, and so if you're looking to do editorial work, and that's what you really want to do, you're probably going to have to incorporate some of that simplified work into what you do, which kind of stinks if you don't really love doing that. So there's that one way of doing going about it, which would be to do that studying and figuring out what's working in those industries right now, or just draw however you want and how you love to draw and figure that out, and then maybe see where your work fits. Which way did you go? Did you try to develop a style that was just mostly you and then figure out where it fit, or did you try to see where you wanted to fit and then to kind of aim in that direction when you were developing your style? Does that make sense?
Yeah, I think it was both. You look at who you're influenced by. That ends up being a natural target of where you want to grow to, and then you see, does my work compare? Like, can I put my work in the same gallery and it fit with
Right.
these uh, influences? Um, but then you might find that even though those were your influences, you've drifted to a new world. You know, you drifted on a different
Right.
path where now your work might fit better somewhere else, and that's okay. You just have to be self-critical enough to even realize where you fit now. And
Yeah.
sometimes you can't see it, and sometimes you have to be told, and that's why it's so important to have critique groups and to be in discussions all the time with peers and other artists and mentors, so that you could have the new set of eyes on your work and some guidance as to where they might see you fit. And
That's true. I when I was developing my style, I guess I did want to work in editorial work, and so I looked at what people were doing in editorial, and I thought that I was moving in that direction. And then when I finally got to where I am now, I realized that that's really not where the editorial world is anymore, and my work doesn't necessarily fit that well into that pigeonhole. And so but that's okay because now I have a very distinct style and it does work in a lot of places. It just doesn't work where I thought it was going to work.
mhm.
But because I set the goal of making work that would be editorial, it helped me guide me into a style. Even though the style doesn't fit in editorial really anymore, I do get occasional jobs, but mostly editorial work is nothing like what I'm doing right now.
See, once you find yourself and find your style and catch a good groove, um, I think that's really important. Like, I can fake my style and have it work for whatever it needs to work for, and that, sure, that's a great skill. I believe anyone and everyone should be able to do that, or should learn to do that. Um, but in an ideal world, you should be able to find your style, and art directors and editors and publishers will then be able to find you and match you with the project that fits the best. And now you're not competing with anyone else but yourself. You know, sure, there's tons of other illustrators out there, but now they're because of how you work, you know, because of the feel that the
Yeah, no, it's true. And once you do develop a style that you're strong at, other people will start almost helping you see where you fit. Like art directors might contact you for something that you weren't expecting. and that's great. Like, it's because they've recognized that you've got a distinct style, and they think it fits with a certain project. I wanted to talk about something that somebody commented on the video that I made a few years ago about style, and it basically said, you only need a style if you're going to market your work, if you're going to sell out, basically. It was kind of a little bit of a rude comment. Um, and so I thought about it, and I was thinking, like, okay, well, that kind of is fair, right? Because if you are going to sell your work, that it is more important to have a style. But then the more I thought about it, I thought, you know what though? When I was learning art, and I was drawing in all these different styles, um, I have a lot more fun now than I did then, because now that I've developed a style that almost I'm perfecting, the work is coming out so much better that I'm just enjoying it, because the better the work comes out, the more you're going to enjoy it as an artist. You're going to really be proud of your work. Whereas before, yeah, I was doing tons of different styles, but I, it wasn't enjoyable because 9 out of 10 of my drawings, they didn't come out good. And
Yeah,
so I do think even if you're not going to market your work, it's probably worth trying to figure out a style that works for you, because the more you perfect that and get good at it, the better you're going to feel as an artist.
yeah. I hear that all the time at school. It's like, oh, you're just a sellout. You're a sellout. Why is that a negative thing? Like you're now making a career and you're making money off of something you love, and now you
Yep.
can do it all the time. Like, hell yeah, I'm gonna sell out any day of the week. If I can keep doing what I love to do, and so I wouldn't look at that as a negative.
I think it's because people have such a negative view of capitalism that if you're using your art to make money, then that's you're part of capitalism, and so you're a sellout. Right? I don't agree with that, but I'm just saying I think that's probably has something to do with it.
Well, people get too attached with their art. I don't even like saying that it's my art. It's not made for me. It's made for everyone else. It's everyone else's art, and it's very narcissistic, I think, to think, well, it's my art.
Yeah,
Like it.
every, that sellout thing does never bothered me, because it's usually people that are jealous or bitter that they're not making money with their art, and I feel like if they could, they probably would. Um, but I mean, I saw a video on TikTok the other day that drove me nuts. It was this guy, and he does these little, well, he does like anti-capitalist videos, which are fine, whatever. But one of them was about copyright, and he makes these little songs, and he's an artist and a musician, and his song was saying like, a copyright law shouldn't exist, and then his song basically described why he thought it shouldn't exist, but basically because the only reason um, art or excuse me, the only reason copyright law exists is because we have to monetize our art to sell it, and what really should be is a world where there's no money and everybody just has enough, and then you can just make art for the fun of it and for the enjoyment, and if that was the world we lived in, then copyright law wouldn't exist, right? And I thought about it for a second, and I thought, well, first of all, copyright law should exist because that's not the world we live in, right? And second of all, even if there was no money whatsoever, copyright copyright law should still exist, because I don't want the KKK using a piece of my art to recruit people. Do you know what I mean? Like, you should be able to have full control over what your art is used for, even if there's no money in the world. And I think you should be able to control that. Maybe that's a stupid thought, but I think that that's how I feel. I feel like you should be able to have control over how your art is used and what it's being used for.
Hmm, yeah, that's a good point.
So, but I got off track a little because you talked about selling out, and then it reminded me of that. And it kind of drove me nuts, but I didn't comment on it because I was like, I'm just gonna get in an argument with this guy over nothing. And he's obviously never had his art stolen, or you know what I mean? Nobody's ever probably stolen his art and tried to sell prints or whatever, and I think if he had dealt with that, he probably wouldn't feel the same way.
Yeah. Yeah, it is tricky. It's like of course I don't it would be a perfect world if I didn't have to think about making money off of my art.
Right.
Sure, that sounds great. But, there is a chance that you can get to that state by selling your art enough. And so you can make enough of a living and have enough of a nest egg to then, that could be a retirement goal. You don't have to stop working, but now you don't have to worry about it. So,
Yeah. But even if you lived in a world of no money, but there was like bartering, you would still use your art to barter, right?
mhm,
And just you don't have as much leverage because people don't need art. But so if you have a skill like plumbing, you're more likely to have higher leverage when you barter. But the beautiful thing about, well, I don't know, that's not the right word. The thing about capitalism is, um, you can set your own value and nah, I don't even wanna go into actually, I'm not gonna get into it right now with about capitalism. I just think that, I'm happy to be able to make a living with my art, and I know that, it's not possible in other parts of the world, um, and and so I'm just happy to be able to be in this situation, and I do know there are a lot of artists that are great artists, and they aren't able to monetize their work because they don't have the marketing skills and that skill set. And so I do feel bad for those people because they're artistically they could easily make a living, but you do need to be able to do both things. So it's a I don't know, it's kind of like a catch 22.
yeah.
Um, so I do you have anything else you wanted to talk about as far as
Style.
how you developed your style
Um,
that you thought was important? I think what you said about it evolving over time, it's always evolving, is really the truth, and kinda maybe what we should just end on is, you know, there's never an end point with style.
yeah.
Like, right now, I'm not at an end point, I'm still developing, and I'm excited to see in 5 years what I'm drawing because I know 5 years ago, my work is way different than it is now, and I'm
Mhm.
using different mediums, and I'm doing a lot of things that I wouldn't have thought I was gonna do, so who knows where it will be in 5 years, and I'm kinda happy that um, it develops, but it develops slowly enough that I can still maintain a style, if I was trying to force it and move and evolve too quickly, I think it would become a mess, and, um, I I think that you have to just allow it to kinda happen in a way.
Yeah. Yeah, and look back at your old work. See how you've grown. See like what were some key pieces that made you go in a different direction or learn something that really made you level up and just kind of just identifying those things, identifying those
Yeah.
specific pieces and in betweens um can be helpful in figuring out what figuring out who you are as an artist.
Yeah, I think that's a good thing to do. Just yeah, I might go back and do that. Try to figure out pieces where, this is kind of where I started figuring this out, or this is, that might be kind of interesting thing to do. Um, so really quick, I have a class right now that's portraits. It's a 6 lesson class. It's on Carlos Sondheim's website. You can find like more about it in my Instagram, and there's links to the website. Um, and it's live right now. So anybody that wants to go and take the 6 lessons, and you get to post your assignments in the Facebook group, and I'll comment on them. It's a really supportive community, and you'll kind of see the process I use to create portraits. And actually, Joe is going to be. Tell them about the course you're going to be teaching on the same platform.
Yeah, I'm not sure what we're gonna finalize the title as, but it's gonna be a character development class that um, teaches you the methodology on how to bring your work to the next level. So it doesn't even necessarily have to be applied to character design, but different techniques in ideation and how to develop develop your work, develop your characters further, and
Nice.
to find a narrative, to find meaning, to find the story. Give your work more depth. Um, so I'm super excited
Do
to have that
Do you know
recorded
when
and
the class? You don't know when the class is going to be released, though, right?
I'm not sure. I think it's mid-November-ish, but I'll let you guys know when it comes closer.
That makes sense because you're going to film it in 2 weeks, and when I filmed mine in late September and it came out, all right, late August, and it came out in late September, about a month later. So you'll probably have yours
Yeah,
about a month after you're filming it in 2 weeks. So look for those classes if you're interested in portraits or character development. And like Joe said, with either class, like you can take the things that you learn from my portrait class and use them with landscapes. There's things you can learn just because with drawing there's a lot of crossover, and with character development you could probably take that and use it for a lot of different creative avenues. Um, so yeah, look for those. And until next time, we won't be here in 2 weeks because that's when Joe will be in Seattle filming. So we'll see you guys in 3 weeks.
sounds good. Take
All
care.
right.